Okay, I have a little bit of a headache. My hair's kind of a mess. My room's kind of messy, but hey, let's do this. Okay, so I have, as of now, just finished my entire video course of Python, where it talks about the beginner lessons, the intermediate lessons, and the advanced lessons. And pretty much this whole video is kind of like almost like a journal of sorts, just to kind of document where I'm at right now and where I kind of started, what I did in the beginning, how I felt back then, and kind of where it's going. But even though I'm gonna explain this, I'm pretty sure this is still gonna be kind of messy because I'm not good at recalling things all the time. So I don't know, what are you gonna do? So overall, I started about around a month ago where pretty much I got my bachelor's in IT, and I'm still planning, because right now I'm interning and I'm planning to get a full-time job in IT. So I'm trying to go find jobs for that right now. But at the same time, I kind of realized while looking for jobs, maybe I kind of like want to look somewhere else in terms of the IT scope of careers. And I know IT is more of like a general field. That's where I was aiming for. So in terms of learning about hardware and some software that applies into hardware and how you can use that for different fields that IT, like general IT, can go into, like front help desk work. That was mainly where I was going for. But then I realized while going through and trying to find different jobs, hey, maybe I kind of want to look elsewhere. But I was already like, well, I mean, I got my degree, so it's like, and I still like my degree. It's not like I don't like it, but hey, maybe at the same time, I kind of want to look elsewhere in terms of just a different path in IT. So if I ever do, or maybe I do, then I can have it. And back during community college, and I guess kind of my 4-year college, I did take classes in software engineering, but at the time when I got into it, I was really into it in the beginning, but then as time went on, I started to really lose interest fast because of how difficult the learning curve was and about what you had to learn. So I was like, yeah, this isn't really for me. Maybe I should try more general based IT work. And that's kind of where I went. But now when I was looking for jobs again, I was like, maybe I kind of want to look back into software engineering. So I pretty much the only way I could think of to find out how you can become a software engineer was I went to YouTube like everyone else. So I did that. So after that, I then went to go find YouTube videos on, hey, how do you become a software engineer? Where do you have to begin? Because I'm not in college anymore, so I can't go back there to find out how. So how do you do that? And mainly I found out that there are two differentiating paths, and I learned more about this as I went forward into learning software engineering. There is front-end development and back-end development. And technically there's a third path where it's the combination of the two that's full stack, but overall there's mainly just the main two paths, right? So front-end is what the person on the website is clicking on and how they're interacting with the website. And then there's a back-end where the website takes information from the database or wherever, the thing that it needs to get is at, and then brings it over to the front end. And there are people that work in back end to make that work. And then there are people in front end to make what the person is interacting with works, right? So I learned about that. So I was like, okay, what should I learn first? And then I learned about Python. And Python is more in back end development than anything else. And again, back then, I really didn't know too much about back end and front end development. So I was like just learning. I was like, okay, I should learn a coding language. What's the most popular one? And what's the one that people really use a lot in software engineering? And I saw it was two. I thought at the time the most popular was Python, but no, later on I learned it was JavaScript, right? Python is still really popular, right? So I took Python. And that's kind of where I went in terms of first learning software engineering. So what did I first do in terms of learning Python? Well, first, I went to YouTube and I found a video series. I found a video series called Code with Mosh, and he had a free, just full 1 hour video series talking about Python, what it is, the more beginning bits and to somewhat intermediate bits. It was like a 1 hour video course where he explained everything really well and in a very clear and concise way to understand it, right? So I spent that whole hour just carefully learning about Python, about the beginning bits of it. I learned about basic syntax, I learned about comments, I learned about variables. I then went on to learn about for and while statements. I then learned, for and while loops. I'm sorry. Again, I'm speaking off the top of my head. For and while loops. I then went on to learn about if-else statements. I then learned about that. I then went on to learn about defining functions. I learned about methods. And that was really the beginning bits of that video. It was just talking about everything revolving around that. Okay, well, actually, no, not really. It wasn't really talking about defining methods, or I mean, not defining methods again, sorry. Defining functions and learning about functions and methods. It was more about everything else though. But I learned about that and he explained it in a very clear and concise way. And I really enjoyed it. And it was work. And I realized that while going through it, that like my brain was like, okay, just slow down a little bit. Let's take this one step at a time. But I got through it and I really enjoyed it. So what happened next was once I finished the video series, he then said, hey, on my main website, I have for a paid like $20, like you can keep it forever afterwards, like the whole video series. I have a full video series talking about everything in Python in terms of the beginner bits, the intermediate bits, and then the advanced bits. And you can buy that on my website. So then I went to his website and he has a lot on there. He talks about a bunch of things beyond just Python. He talks about SQL, he talks about JavaScript, he talks about GitHub, he talks about like a bunch of different things that I'm still kind of looking at right now. But I went over to his Python series. And over there, he talks about how he has a bunch of different things on there. A lot of the things I learned in the beginning. He has a bunch of different projects on there. He has a bunch of different like real world examples that you can learn again by paying the $20. So I did, and I went through it. And again, like how it went before, I learned everything that I learned in the free YouTube video, but then I went on to learn more about the intermediates and the advanced. So some of the things I learned, and again, speaking off the top of my head, if I'm talking weird or if I'm forgetting things or saying things wrong, that's why. Some of the things I learned in terms of the intermediates, I learned about defining functions. That was one thing I did learn. I learned more about functions in general. I learned about methods more. I then learned more about classes. Oh my goodness. And to be fair, I still really want to look more into classes to understand that more, because that is still something that's still kind of like, ooh, okay, I need to learn that more. I understand the overall idea of it and how to apply it in a basic way, but I need to learn about that way more. I learned about list comprehension as well. List comprehension, that was something that took a lot of time to learn. Like that was something where when learning it was so hard to grasp the idea of how that works and how that works in terms of converting like a for loop or a while loop into a list comprehension. But then I finally got the idea of it. I finally figured out how to do it. Now I can do it pretty well in my opinion. But yeah, I learned that too. And yeah, and you know what? To add more context, right? When I started learning more on his main website in terms of the video course series I paid for Python. Back when I was learning it and I was going through the courses, one thing I will totally 100% say is that when learning it, oh my goodness, okay. So, you know how you're learning something and when you're learning it, it's so hard to grasp the ideas and the concepts that they're trying to teach you, where it makes it feel like your head is literally swelling, it's starting to puff, and it's hurting like a lot. That's what that was for me when learning Python. It has nothing to do with his videos, by the way. Like, it has nothing to do with it. I would have got that from any other place to learn Python. But man, oh my goodness, man, that hurt my head. Like I'm not joking. Like, it felt like literally my head was puffing and swelling. And that happened for like 2 weeks. Like no lie. Oh my goodness, man. But yeah, after those 2 weeks, then I finally started to feel a lot better. My head did not feel like it was about to explode anymore. I finally started to like really understand what I was, trying to learn. And from there, I then started to learn at a more normalish pace that I feel like. And yeah. Okay, so then we go more into the advanced stuff. Now, I kind of said in terms of intermediates, that was more classes. I kind of feel like that's more advanced in my opinion, because that involves object-oriented programming, which again, like I said before, I'm still trying to learn more of, and that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. Just learning about the idea of it and how that works, and applying it in a real life situation or in like real situations involving Python. It takes time to learn. That's something where I feel like I need to apply that more in terms of I guess tasks that I would have to do with Python, and also in terms of tasks and doing them in Python. I guess I should talk about the IDE that I've been using. Now there are two really big popular ones. There is, and I'm gonna say this wrong, but VS Code, if I'm saying that right, and PyCharm. Now I tried VS Code first, and to me, I just wasn't digging it. I didn't really like how it worked, and I thought it was just kind of I was kind of like, okay, that's cool, but let's try another one. Then I found PyCharm, and PyCharm, oh my goodness, man, I love PyCharm. I think it's great. But yeah, going into the advanced stuff though, right? Object-oriented programming, that was something I had to learn, and that involved classes. I then went on to learn about frameworks for Python. I learned about the Django, I learned about Flask, and the Django I actually used to do one of the projects that he was talking about in his courses. That was to make a full-on website using Python, classes, the Django, and everything I learned in Python in terms of the basics and intermediates. I did that too, and yeah, like that took a lot of work. It really did, and mainly because of an issue in terms of using the right version of the Django and Python. And it was something else also. I'm sorry. It was like another package I was using at the same time, and making sure that all were compatible with each other, because I had a bunch of problems in terms of like uploading things and making sure things were running correctly in terms of the server that I was establishing. And I had a lot of issues with that, but I finally got around it, so I did that too. And I guess one more thing that I could think about that I did in terms of the advanced stuff is AI machine learning. And actually, compared to learning about frameworks in the Django, or the Django, if I'm saying that right, sorry, that was actually a lot simpler than learning about the Django, or the Django, I'm sorry. To be totally fair, 100% fair, because I could be like, if someone's watching this and they spent years learning about machine learning and Python, they could be like, what are you talking about? Like, it's super hard. And yeah, I don't know. But the main reason why that was easier to me was because in terms of the courses and how they were teaching about machine learning, as far as I could really tell, and I could tell this, they were talking about the beginner stuff and how that works, and how you would implement machine learning with Python. So I got to learn the beginning bits of that, and that was really cool to learn too. And I learned a lot in there, and that is something else, a lot like object-oriented programming, that I really need to do more in order to understand it more, because that's something where it's like almost like it feels like another segment of Python altogether, and it is, I believe, unless I'm wrong, but again, I don't know. So but yeah, I guess one more thing, and I will go back to the Django thing, right? So while learning the Django, so like, it's kind of hard to explain. Again, I'm still learning about PyCharm and how that works fully. But so with PyCharm, there are different types of data languages that are compatible with PyCharm, right? And if it's compatible with PyCharm, for example, Python or JavaScript or Java, then PyCharm will be able to understand the syntax for the language, right? But one problem that I went into while learning the Django project that I was doing, where it was to make your own basic simple website using Python, the Django, and some other packages, was that there is the Django HTML syntax that is not compatible with the version of PyCharm, at the very least, that I was using, which caused a lot more work to be made in terms of getting the project made. And if I'm right, I think the professional version of PyCharm actually has support for the HTML, the Django syntax, but I'm not fully sure about that though. So that could have been the reason why, but that is one thing though, in terms of VS Code, that PyCharm, at least the community edition that I was using, doesn't have. Now, I guess I'll talk about some other things I did outside of these main video courses in terms of learning more about Python. One big help of inspiration that I used was a website called Code Wars, where pretty much with Code Wars, it takes pretty much anything you learn in terms of the beginner bits to the advanced bits and applies it in like problems where you have to take what you know and apply it to the problem that they give you. And it's really cool because it's not like it's a bunch of questions that like people that made the site made. It's like Reddit, where it's like people that sign up for the site can make their own questions to post to people in like a certain difficulty category. So if you're in the beginner bits, then the Code Wars website will show you beginner problems made by people who also are part of the site too, that go do questions and different things like that, or like different projects, right? And that was something I used a lot. So every time I learned something new in terms of the video course, I would then take that over to Code Wars and try to find problems that like apply to it and do those problems. And that helps a lot in terms of learning what you learned in the video courses, where everything I learned in terms about variables, about ints, booleans, strings, in terms of functions and methods, I get to apply them in problems to help actually practice my brain and train my brain in terms of remembering what I learned and applying it to those problems. And that was a really big help. What else did I learn? Now, another resource I used a lot that was very helpful, but it also had a really big caveat, at least in terms of using it on my laptop, was w3schools.com. That is a fantastic resource in terms of learning certain methods and functions and data types, and in terms of remembering what I needed to remember in terms of getting problems involving Python done. And it's also really cool because there's a section on there where it has like a quiz in terms of remembering like the certain terminology for different methods and functions, and remembering what certain methods and functions are, and like in terms of like remembering what like certain data types are and how they work in Python. It's really cool, and I would go back to that a lot and use that a lot in terms of remembering what I've learned in the video series and seeing if I can really remember it and keep that in my brain. And that was something that really helped a lot too. And yeah, I feel like in terms of everything else, there's probably other things I learned too that helped a lot that I just can't remember, just because whenever I'm in front of a video camera, it kind of makes my brain go boop, and I can't remember things too well in terms of being in front of a video camera. But yeah, like overall, those were the main things that I really learned in terms of learning Python. And like I said before, I am now at the very end of this video series. I now went through everything that he wanted to teach me in terms of Python, and now my main goal for right now is to, I guess first thing, right, is to take everything I learned and reapply it in terms of doing, small practice problems, in terms of very much applying it to like real world projects I want to do. Now the Django project that I did for making a website, that is definitely a project that I did. But one thing I really want to do though is really like do projects where while I'm doing the project, I really understand what I'm doing, and that's something I really want to get done too. So I want to do more projects, and I do have something in mind, but it's not as big as I want it to be in terms of like a project. But there is something I do want to do though, right? So I want to do that too. I really want to like do more projects. And in terms of where I want to go from here, right now, actually, I feel like, because like I said before, there are two types of software engineers. There is front end and back end. I feel like right now, and I would love to hear like more opinions about this. I feel like I want to try JavaScript now, because I learned how Python works, how that works in terms of applying it in more real world situations, even though I want to do more more projects as well. But I also want to try out JavaScript to see if I really enjoy front end development too, because before I go too far into back-end development and learning more about Python and different frameworks and how they all work together and learning really deeply into that, I want to see if learning front-end development is something I actually enjoy too, and then from there see where I want to focus more of my mind on in terms of learning software engineering right now. And yeah, And with that, that's pretty much everything I really wanted to say. Again, this was it was jumbled and just kind of all over the place, but it's me just kind of talking about everything that I've done so far in terms of learning software engineering in Python and what it took to learn that and where I kind of want to go from here. And this is again, like more or less just kind of like a journal in terms of like detailing where I'm at and where I want to go, right? So yeah, that's gonna end the video off for here. Thank you for watching, and yeah, if I make another video in terms of like documenting where I'm kind of at right now and where I'm going in terms of software engineering, then I'll make one. But yeah, for now, that's gonna be it. Thank you for watching, and yeah, bye.